was raised among the dead, an undertaker's grandson, trained not in glory, but in silence. Yunsel grew up with nothing but his grandfather's guidance, learning how to read the bodies of the fallen, every scar, every wound, every hidden truth carved into flesh. But one night, everything was stolen. His grandfather, once a feared master of the demonic blade, was hunted down, his arms severed, his eyes gouged out, his life bled away before Yunsel's very eyes. His final words, "Do not seek revenge." But how could Yunsel obey when the only family he had was butchered in front of him? With nothing left but rage, Yunsel steps into the demon palace, where prodigies are forged into the 10 demon masters. To others, it's an opportunity for power. For him, it's the first step toward vengeance. Looked down on as weak, Yunsel reveals his true gift, not raw strength, but terrifying observation. He dissects every battle, every enemy technique, and when others fall, he survives. From Hell Island's deadly trials to mastering the beast-like senses of forbidden martial arts, Yunsel carves a path no one expected. A path built not on fate, but on blood, loss, and cold determination. This is not the rise of a chosen hero. This is the story of a boy who defied death itself to hunt the demons who destroyed his world. The story opens in the fearsome Alliance, a place also called the Demon Palace. Crowds of people are shown standing in a long line, eagerly waiting for an unknown event. A man appeared surprised, realizing the amount was much greater than he had anticipated. A different man explained that naturally, the group claimed they would accept anyone, no matter their background or allegiance, offering to train them in forbidden martial arts if they showed promise, and remarked that it would be a shame to let such a chance slip away. The man remarked that, had he been younger, he would have submitted an application. As he finished speaking, the elderly gentleman's attention was suddenly drawn to something nearby. Someone wondered aloud whether a person had passed away. His coworker pointed out that the 10 Demon Palace competition had not begun, suggesting that he was making assumptions too soon. The elderly man wonders aloud about the presence of someone so young working as an undertaker. The young boy gazes upwards, his eyes fixed on the sky above. He declared that this was only the start, expressing his hope that his grandfather was observing his actions. They discover that his name is a name his grandfather bestowed upon him. After rescuing from a snowy field, his grandfather, who worked as an undertaker, taught him the trade as well. A young carefully examined the cadaver, noting that the man had once mastered an exceptionally fast style of swordsmanship. His grandfather wanted to know why that thought had come to his mind. The boy responded by pointing out his thin frame, noting that the muscles on his left leg, particularly at the front of his calf, were surprisingly strong and well-shaped. He also reflected on how working as an undertaker was a profession that often caused others to dislike them. His grandfather's pride in him meant everything, making any other opinion unimportant. His grandfather believed that his grandson possessed a divine talent for undertaking, as if the heavens themselves had blessed him with this gift. Regardless of the challenges he faced, his grandfather remained by his side through it all. Things had been fine, but that changed unexpectedly. One morning, while he was still asleep, his grandfather quietly got out of bed. He gazes through the window at the bamboo forest beyond. A powerful wind swept through the forest, causing him to feel an unusual presence. She appeared to recognize the object, recalling the saying that gentle souls never come searching for you, while those who actively pursue you will never succeed in finding you. He gently urges to awaken, assuring her of his goodwill. He challenged the other to a contest, eager to see who could pretend to be lifeless more convincingly. Determined to succeed, he knew that if he performed well, he would finally receive the clothes and sword he had been longing for. His excitement was clear, as he eagerly wondered whether the other person truly meant what he had just said. He was placed gently inside a coffin. His grandfather advised him to persevere and hold on until morning arrived. Wonders aloud about the reason for such a lengthy duration. His grandfather simply shuts the lid of the coffin. He reached out and took hold of his sword. He steps out into the open air, where the sound of a man's voice drifts toward him. He had secluded himself, almost as if he were trying to disappear from the world. The rat was questioned about his opinion, leading to the revelation that his grandfather had once been involved. Was known as a martial artist who wielded the demonic blade from the title VII branch. Yang admits that it has been a long time since he last heard that name, and the person standing before him is. He explained that he had stepped down from the vice palace master position simply. He struggled to make a living through subpar work, and then suddenly lunged forward, launching an attack from above. Both sides launched their assaults, and the force of their blows crashed together in a powerful clash. Explained that he accepted the job, not out of necessity to survive, but as a way to atone for the choices he had made throughout his life. He effortlessly defended himself against the strike. He offers his life in exchange, but insists they move to a different location, unwilling to risk harm to innocent bystanders. The attacker bursts into laughter at the sight. He reluctantly agreed, warning that running away was not an option he should even consider. It becomes clear that he never had that intention in the first place. Inside the casket, the box trembled violently until at last burst out from within. He admits that he couldn't wait any longer, expressing his strong desire for both the uniform and the sword, though he finds the temperature far too chilly. He begins to question the whereabouts of his grandfather. He usually waited for him during games like this, and wondered whether the enforcers had summoned him. He believes that, in their eyes, entertainers are not even considered human beings. As he steps outside, an unexpected sight catches him off guard. He felt a surge of surprise as his eyes took in the many scars left by the assault his grandfather had managed to fend off. He notices the distant echoes of a battle unfolding somewhere far away. He wishes it isn't real and chases after the possibility. Sam froze in place, his face pale with terror. He gazes at his grandfather, noticing the look in the old man's eyes. Noticed that the person's eyes were missing and their arms had been severed. He rushed to the scene, and his grandfather questioned if the injured individual was actually. Confirmed that it was indeed the case and wanted to know what had happened. He then offered an apology. And explained that he needed to leave. If the man were to lose his life, he would no longer be able to carry on as the Undertaker. Interrupts him, urging him to be quiet. Instructed him to pay careful attention, warning that seeking revenge must never cross his mind. Despite his growing frustration, clenched his teeth tightly, unable to hide his irritation. He shouted that they were responsible for turning him into who he was, and declared he would never forgive them. He states that, unless he is granted the chance for revenge, he decided he would prefer to leave with him instead of staying behind alone. Yang admitted that he once believed he could move on. He wished for a peaceful passing, believing this was the final thing he needed. He is being sent on a quest, with instructions to travel a great distance from home. He remembered how much happiness he felt during the time they spent together. He exhales for the final time, and the figure begins to lean forward, losing their balance. The character collapses onto the ground, remaining utterly still. Gazed at his hand, now stained with blood. The lifeless body of his grandfather lay before him. He appeared visibly shaken, as the experience seemed to shatter him from within. Over time, his eyes ran out of tears to shed. He resorts to the skills he excels at. He carries out Undertaker duties for his grandfather. He explains that advising him against seeking revenge was. She tried to shield him, yet he ignored her warnings for once. His arms had clearly been severed at the precise point. At that moment, an unusual assault surged upward from beneath, its rarity making the attack all the more surprising. They shift their approach, now aiming their attack directly at his eyes. The unusual sword technique could only have originated from the demonic path, she realized. It seemed likely that only the yoga technique could inflict injuries of this nature. There were 93 marks on his back, each one a sign of past encounters with concealed weapons, while even the most skilled, known as the sky full of falling flowers, had no more than 66. However, this difference did not diminish his abilities as a formidable player. It did not appear to be the work of another person. Instead, it seemed as if a concealed weapon had fired hundreds of projectiles. All at once, attention shifted to him. The area beneath his tongue was also noticeable. His fingernails appeared marred by discoloration. Being exposed to a deadly poison leads to the flesh decaying and the blood turning foul. A practitioner aligned with the demonic path, having mastered the yoga technique, wielded a top-tier concealed weapon and relied on explosives capable of spreading a foul stench. Rotting tissue and tainted blood. This greatly reduces the number of people he needs to search for. Now that he understood which clues could be discovered, now more resolute than before, he set his mind on uncovering the identity of the person responsible, ready to follow any lead that might bring him closer to the truth. In the present moment, a solitary tear fell onto the paper as he wrote his name. The guards fixed their gaze on him, their expressions filled with curiosity as they wondered aloud what sort of rural sect the clan could possibly be. A guard speculated that the man looked frightened because he had read the documents about surrendering control over his own body. She instructs him that if he refuses to stamp his finger, he should simply leave. Lifts his thumb towards his lips and begins to speak. She bit into it, tearing away the skin, which left both guards startled. He goes on to share that everything changed for him when his grandfather died. He lost everything, and his world fell apart. He realized that vengeance was the only road remaining to him. He believed that entering this competition would be the beginning of putting his plan into action. The narrative reveals a history of prolonged conflict between the orthodox and unorthodox sects vying for dominance within the orthodox sects, united under the leadership of the Alliance, strive to uphold justice, while the unorthodox sects, gathered around the Demon Palace, revere power above all else. For a significant period, these opposing factions managed to sustain a fragile balance. The orthodox sects, eager to move forward, ended up establishing the group of 18 martial masters who became known as the Masters for the Greater Good. Faced with the looming danger posed by the Alliance, the leaders of the Demon Palace sought a strategy to strengthen their own influence. In response, they devised a scheme to establish an elite group known as the 10 Demon Masters. Setting aside any former loyalties, they resolved to choose 10 exceptionally talented individuals. These chosen prodigies would be instructed in the unique martial arts techniques of each of the 10 demonic sects, granting them access to the most powerful teachings available. The authentic martial arts techniques practiced within the Demon Palace. One of the main motivations that drew everyone to the Demon Palace in the first place was this very reason. A crowd of people glanced about, their eyes scanning the surroundings. On the other side of the palace, he remarks that he can feel the presence of a powerful force. Several individuals in the crowd seemed to radiate a distinct aura. Among those present, there was a high chance that one individual had a connection to the person responsible for his grandfather's death. The murderer possessed martial skills far surpassing what he could comprehend, making it impossible for him to truly assess the threat. Driven by a desire for vengeance, he set out on his path. He aspired to reach the status of a martial master like that figure, but at present, without possessing those qualities, he remained unable to do so. Lacking any connections or training in martial arts, he realized that the fastest path to gaining strength was by joining the ranks of the 10 demonic masters. Several of the contestants appeared caught off guard. A man walked in, unexpected, with a group of people following closely behind him. He revealed that he was the chief instructor, known by the name, and that people often called him the Gold Dagger with blood eyes. Onlookers spotted him, and were astonished to see that the headmaster had appeared in person. He explains that this location serves as a testing ground to discover the most talented individuals from every demon sect, and that admission is reserved for those who. Anyone who successfully completed every challenge set by the demons would earn the chance to be chosen as one of the 10 demon candidates. The masters began to discuss the details of the first trial. The skilled fighters from the Demon Palace prepared to evaluate everyone's physical abilities. Several individuals wondered aloud how this event could be considered a trial, believing instead that it resembled a competition. They began to seize the items and examine them closely. Those who succeed end up being set apart from everyone else. The person who had suggested having a competition quickly backed down and admitted they might not want to go through with it after all. Explains that those who succeed in this test are allowed to proceed to the following location. A man approaches him. He lifted his hands and began to examine Spotty closely. He suddenly feels surprised by what he sees. He was described as being utterly terrible, with no redeeming qualities. He was surprised that he had chosen to take part at all. Nevertheless, the act of taking a life, the determination he showed as he let go was unquestionably genuine. He remained unable to allow the other to go by. Considered his words carefully before expressing his thoughts. Up to this point, he had only mastered the care of the dead, leaving him completely unprepared to succeed in a challenge like this. Nevertheless, it seemed impossible for things to end like this. Several individuals in the crowd began to show signs of frustration. Expressing a sense of injustice, the character felt that the situation was simply too unfair. If the selection of the 10 demon masters depends solely on physical skill, the character questioned the purpose of holding a competition, feeling that the entire situation was unjust. Bursts into laughter, then explains that the foundation of martial arts lies in strong muscles and bones. He goes on to mention that the competition was organized to find talented individuals from different areas who possess these essential qualities. Despite struggling to meet even the simplest requirements, they still found reasons to grumble, which seemed almost comical. One of the men insisted that they deserved at least a fair chance. Fixed her gaze on him, her eyes sharp and intense like a sudden flash of lightning. An aura began to glow from his eye, as he reassured the other person that there was no need for concern. He felt anxious, knowing that for the second trial, he would choose individuals who, even with weak physical abilities, showed strong potential to master martial arts. The second trial was set to begin right away. From this moment forward, everyone was required to turn against one another and battle fiercely. The only thing that mattered was staying alive until everyone else was gone. The contestants insisted that they shared a common goal, and none of them wished to oppose each other. The boy who had been talking non-stop let out a sigh, resigning himself to act first under the circumstances. Regardless of the outcome, this situation would benefit him. Even if it required him to take a life, he was prepared to do so. He glanced over his shoulder and noticed standing with a woman. They believed that this group would be the simplest to go after. He seizes his spear, determination flashing in his eyes, and rushes directly toward his opponents. He moved in until he was within range, then hurled the object in their direction. The creature let out a shriek about death and suddenly darted directly at. The blade pierced the girl, and he declared that at last, this was the moment he could end her life. The story reveals that her name is the Red Dragon. His name was Y. She collapses onto the floor, her body giving way beneath her. Fixed her gaze ahead, her expression unsettling those around her as the realization spread. She was truly lifeless. She calmly explained that the blow had missed the ribs entirely and pierced straight into her heart. Despite his frail build, moves with quick reflexes and impressive agility. Boldly invited anyone else who wished to challenge him to come forward, confidently assuring them that he could handle every opponent. Claims to make quick decisions, yet often shows poor judgment, and just as he thought, the area is crowded with people he considers useless. One of the assistants acknowledged that anyone who appeared dangerous in a fight like this would naturally attract attention and become a target. However, this situation was likely to motivate the others to take action. Slowly retreats as the crowd around her panics, unsure of how to respond to the situation. As impatience spread among the crowd, tensions rose until they began turning on one another, resulting in violence. A man attempts to retreat. He is suddenly wounded as a sharp blade pierces his side. Observes that the younger individuals, unaccustomed to loss, now appear utterly lost and powerless. At this moment, chaos erupted into a full-scale massacre. A sense of total panic had taken hold of some individuals. Some of the characters can be seen participating in one-on-one battles. When confronted with their possible demise, individuals unlikely to survive would find their senses numb and unresponsive. He suddenly notices something that draws his attention. He appears to be quite impressed. An assistant glances in their direction. Upon understanding the subject of the conversation, remarks to herself that apparently not everyone among them lacks sense after all. Stood beside another man, both of them resting their backs against the wall. despite the ongoing loss of lives around her, manages to survive. The speaker dismissed the group as mere fools, claiming they had become consumed by their fear of dying. According to his order, survival was the only goal, until just one person remained. The crucial point, then, was not about taking lives, but about making it through alive. He believed that as long as he remained logical and kept his emotions in check, he would be able to stay alive. He was determined to do whatever it took to keep himself alive. At that moment, he begins to examine one of the corpses. Someone in the distance continued to battle, wielding a weapon that could strike from afar. At that moment, they noticed and immediately judged from his appearance that he seemed pitiful, assuming he must have been hiding somewhere nearby. For quite a while, shadows had lingered in the area. Meanwhile, carefully examined the scene to determine what had caused the man's death. He explains that a rapid exchange of sword strikes erupted, followed by a sudden burst of intense action. With a graceful sweep of a thin blade, the assailants targeted, catching him just as he was distracted. He became distracted, and just as the object shot toward him, he managed to dodge at the last moment, barely avoiding it as it smashed into the ground below. He continued to hold the box he had been carrying. He tumbles out, prompting the others to burst into laughter as they tease him, questioning what he is doing. He wondered if the man dealt in temple relics, perhaps carrying boxes meant for such trade. Gazed downward, her eyes fixed on the clothing before her. The scene shifts to a memory of his birthday, when he received a special present. The items consisted of an outfit along with a weapon. He lifts his eyes, his stare icy and unwelcoming. He lowers himself into a crouch, positioning his body near the blade that lies just beneath him. The individual lifted their weapon again, challenging him to see if he was ready to try his luck. He prepares to leave, feeling powerless with his tiny sword. Doubt fills his mind, and he begins to whirl his weapon around. A weapon flashed through the air as an assailant struck from behind, cutting him down. The person standing beside him, also leaning against the wall, was the one being referred to. He explained that gratitude was unnecessary for his rescue, as he considered himself worthless, much like, whose distracting presence only served to make things simpler for him. Kept her gaze fixed on the rows of clothing, her attention caught by a sudden sound nearby. Others often claimed that he had sharp eyes, yet it appeared as though he had never truly used them. He had mastered martial arts, making it possible for him to take a life in an instant if he wished. Fixes her gaze on him, pointed out that Bo was in possession of the extermination sword, and speculated whether Bo also wielded the legendary Black Soul sword. In the past, Bo had been known as the most powerful swordsman to roam the land. The assistant introduces himself as Woon Gong and explains that he lives deep within a hidden valley. He came across the hidden manual and sword of Black Soul. Since his training relied solely on the instructions from the manual, his technique developed in a unique way. His stances appeared unrefined, and his motions revealed several vulnerabilities, yet at this moment, he remained the only student studying under Black Soul. Despite not possessing great physical power, he remained a formidable contender among the 10 demon masters, and there was a real possibility that victory would be his. Admitted to himself that, deep down, he remained an inexperienced novice who did not deserve to wield the extermination sword. Despite concerns about his health, he found some comfort in knowing that no one around appeared to be more powerful than he was. The assistant shared this sentiment, expressing agreement with his observation. Unless something completely unforeseen happened, continued to gaze at the lifeless bodies scattered before him. While Woon Gong continued to face opponent after opponent, the surroundings gradually quieted as he fought on without pause, observing each adversary as they came. He wiped the blood from his sword and remarked that at that moment, he hadn't anticipated that the person would turn out to be him. Only he and remained alive by the end. He believes that taking the man's life would make him eligible to become a candidate for the 10th. The demon masters stood before him, and he signaled for to approach, challenging her to make a move. Mentions that he is referring to him. Although he was the most powerful individual present, his vulnerability had already been exposed. He had studied the physical forms of each individual. The individual whom Woongong had slain lingered in memory, as Saul gradually rose to her feet. Woongong began to walk forward, mentioning that he intended to put his abilities to the test for a moment. He lunges forward, launching the opening assault. The attacker lunged in every direction, forcing to evade as best he could. Despite his efforts, injuries kept accumulating on his body. Meanwhile, Woongong remarked that all he can manage are awkward attempts to avoid the attacks, yet it's remarkable that he's managed to hold out for this long. Rai and the assistants observed that, at first glance, he appeared to be taking a relentless beating. However, upon closer inspection, a different reality began to emerge. He skillfully contorts his body at the last moment of every blow, narrowly dodging deadly injuries. Though blood flows as he advances amid the onslaught, the cuts remain shallow rather than life-threatening. The assistant insists that it's impossible for him to have gained that knowledge merely by inspecting the bodies. Remained fixated on the scene, his gaze unwavering as he considered the possibility of having been left behind. And if that were the case, the sharpness of his perception was truly remarkable. She looked at him and let out a sigh, thinking to herself that his sword skills were truly disappointing, even after. Despite enduring a relentless series of assaults, all he had managed to do was inflict shallow cuts upon his own skin. The assistant observes that, while he's undoubtedly goading his opponent and skillfully dodging blows, actually managing to strike back with a counterattack is a whole other challenge. A solid blow would be hard to deliver with such a weak physique. Woongong had intended to spare his life for a while, but the other's display of arrogance made him change his mind. Because he is so desperate to end his own life, he rushes ahead, declaring his intentions as he moves. Raised his weapon, expressing his willingness to grant that wish. He realized that this was his single opportunity to achieve victory. After carefully inspecting the bodies of those he had slain, he came to a sudden realization. His final blow consistently targeted his adversary's weaknesses. The focus was on the most critical areas of the body, the heart and the head. Whenever he felt a lethal urge, his blade would always target his enemy's torso. Knowing this pattern, avoiding the attack simply meant sidestepping that area. Woongong was taken by surprise as the action unfolded before him, while kept her gaze fixed directly upward. He identified the precise spot to strike, and directed his focus toward Woongong's throat. He remembers how once mentioned that even skilled martial artists struggle to strengthen the through training. The master explained that if a child were to hit it with all their might, even an adult would be affected. Immediately recognized the opportunity to fake, and launched a direct assault toward the target. Blood started to flow out rapidly. The scene reveals that his attack landed precisely where he intended, striking straight into the other man's throat. The blood belonged to Woongong. After shielding, Woongong lost his balance and collapsed directly onto the ground. Breathing heavily, could feel it coursing through his veins. He glanced around the area, wondering aloud if everything had finally come to an end. The assistant notes that this is a surprising factor they hadn't anticipated. Admits that he had anticipated something impressive, because the technique was known as the sword art of Black Soul. He struck the gong and announced that had successfully completed the second trial. His eyes appeared wild, filled with an uncontrollable madness. He repeatedly heard his grandfather's voice echoing through the house, searching for him and asking about his whereabouts. Filled with excitement, hurried after him, expressing that the boy stands nearby, yet his grandfather insists that he is unable to see him. His face fills with terror. When he turned around, it appeared as though his eyes had been hollowed out. His grandfather remarked that his face was impossible to see. He suddenly woke up, his body covered in cold sweat. He was resting in an unknown place, while everyone else remained awake. The contestants shifted their attention toward him, their gazes fixed, just as a sound reached his ears. He notices the distant roar of the sea, and a sensation washes over him, making it seem as though they are truly there. Inside the ship, he realized that fainting was understandable given the significant amount of blood he had lost. At that moment, his wounds were severe, yet he barely sensed any discomfort. He began to question whether a famous doctor might be responsible for this change. A summons had been issued. Nevertheless, the townspeople continued with their daily lives. Most of the people around him appeared physically fit, and several of their faces struck him as oddly recognizable. He questions inwardly whether these individuals are those who have succeeded in overcoming the first challenge. After exchanging glances, the group broke into shared laughter. He noticed that their eyes, full of disdain, were fixed on him, just as he had anticipated. The assistant informed the group that it was now time for everyone to leave the vehicle. The group reached the next challenge zone, which was known as Hell Island. The boat pulled up to the dock, and the assistant stepped forward. The first person sprang forward, signaling to the others that it was time to jump as well. They began to venture deeper into the island. On the island, he gestured toward a cluster of caves and a steep cliff, explaining that everyone would be spending the night there. They were instructed to put away their old weapons and outfits, then emerge dressed in the new clothes that had been set out for them. They could select any cave they preferred, and swords were available for them to use. Glanced around the area before making her way forward. He walked past a group of people who remarked that, although they had expected it to be humid, the atmosphere indoors felt surprisingly pleasant. A woman and a man found themselves in a disagreement about who deserved the spot, while a second man stepped in to urge them to remain calm, pointing out that there were many other good spots available. Points out that these individuals remain completely unaware of the events that took place during the second trial. After the trial ended, everyone appeared more relaxed and less cautious. Several of those who succeeded in passing the first trial stood out because they were dressed in costly attire. Dressed in fine garments, it seemed likely they belonged to the renowned clans. He realized the second trial served as a test designed to eliminate those considered weak. Bill stood before the assistant, who noticed his hesitation and remarked that Bill still seemed uncertain about his choice. He had been moving slowly for a while, but now was the moment when he needed to be alert and energetic. To dilly-dally, he directly addresses him, using his name. He notes that stood out to him due to the intensity of his gaze. Now, surprised that managed to endure, he is curious about the decision we'll make next. He urges him to make a decision without delay, warning that time is running out. Without hesitation, indicated his choice, deciding on the one nearby. At that moment, something unpleasant began to seep out, a foul mess that left no doubt about its nasty nature. Water pooled around them as the assistant observed the surroundings, noting with disdain that, out of all possible locations, he had selected one that matched his filthy clothing. The assistant was clearly repulsed by the choice. Everyone recognized his remarkable intelligence. The entrance appeared to be nothing more than a cramped, grimy cave, but that was just a deceptive. The interior was spacious enough for someone to use it as a training area, while the small entrance served as protection from unwelcome visitors. After catching a glimpse of what was inside, the majority of people chose to stay away. He carefully examined the entrance, assessing every detail with precision, and then instructed the others on what to do next. Entered the building to get ready, then soon emerged again, revealing herself as the assassin. He announces his intention to clarify the steps they must take moving forward. The island, known for its harsh conditions, contained 10 separate martial arts schools. Within each building, students could master a unique form of the infamous demonic sex martial arts. They could decide whether to master every skill or concentrate on just one, leaving the choice entirely in their hands. They controlled their daily routines, choosing when to rest, have fun, practice martial arts, or work out by themselves. They seemed able to act without any restrictions, which found incredibly strange. The chaos they caused during the second trial left everything in disarray. There was no chance that the group would be allowed to train without interference. Whispers soon filled the air as everyone began discussing their next move. At first, the group began to hurry away. Noticed that everyone appeared to be moving in the same direction, to the Fire Rain Sword sect. He had heard rumors claiming that this sect was the strongest among all the demonic factions. Although mastering their martial arts could be advantageous, he wasn't completely convinced it would guarantee success. He had never been taught any martial arts at all. He didn't mind picking up a skill that wasn't particularly impressive, and he had a clear idea of his next steps. Entering the woods, he soon came across a small cabin hidden among the trees. He questions internally whether he has actually arrived at the correct location. The place was supposed to be called the Wandering Beast Pavilion. Once, their standing was so diminished that they struggled to remain within the ranks of the 10 demon sects, managing to hold on only thanks to their legacy of having produced several of the era's most powerful martial masters. His father had once mentioned them during a conversation about the. Remembering this, he chose this spot as the location, but suddenly the earth started to tremble beneath his feet. He appeared lost in thought, unaware of a mysterious shape tunneling through the ground in his direction. Suddenly, something bursts from the earth, and the sound of a man's voice fills the air as he questions the reason for his presence. He stood in this place, possibly driven by a desire to join the ranks of the 10 demon masters. This marked the beginning of his wandering journey. The mysterious leader of the Beast Pavilion was known as Saw Wu. Glanced over, feeling a bit surprised by the guy's silliness, yet unable to ignore him. He admits that his purpose for coming is to study their martial arts. Wu examined him from head to toe, a laugh escaping as he suggested that it would be wiser not to hurry toward danger and to simply walk away instead. He decided to walk away, clearly unwilling to instruct someone he considered too delicate for martial arts. Explained that he had learned about a martial art rumored to grant someone the strength to withstand any challenge, while Wu expressed his astonishment at knowledge of such a thing. The knowledge of their martial arts, which are on the verge of disappearing, is familiar to him. Yet, mastering these techniques proves difficult even for the most gifted individuals, because the process requires changing his physical form, and with his current condition, attempting this would be fatal in less than 24 hours. He should leave now that he knows this. Bent forward in a respectful bow, prompting Wu to question his actions with a curious look. Notes that, having consented to become his teacher, he would never miss the chance to honor his new master. Wu considered himself a little insane, yet after letting out a weary sigh, he admitted he would. Despite his reservations, he decided to teach the boy as instructed, determined not to let him become confused, since he was only following orders. Emerging from beneath the earth, he reintroduced himself and insisted that he be addressed as Master Saw from this moment forward. Introduced himself, but Wu immediately rejected the name. He was simply known as Trainee Number 1, and everyone realized they could begin immediately. He gently taps the skin beneath his eyes. Almost at once, his eyesight begins to fade. Their eyes suddenly darken until no color remains. He admits that nothing is visible to him, but Wu reassures him, urging him to stay calm. He had merely blocked his sight for a short time, by relying on the hidden arts of the Wandering Night Pavilion. He couldn't tell whether this was the same pavilion, or if there had simply been a mistranslation. He claims that mastering this move is essential for understanding the Wandering Beast path, insisting that it serves as a fundamental martial skill taught by the Wandering Night Pavilion. The transformation would sharpen every one of his senses and grant him animal-like reflexes. The martial arts they practiced stood apart from all others, transforming uniquely with each individual who mastered them. Mastering the Wandering Beast path posed a significant challenge for him. Still, if he succeeded, he would witness a remarkable transformation. The pale form of Wu appeared, and informed him that he would soon experience the heightened instincts of a roaming animal. However, the majority never live long enough to reach that stage. He moved nearer to, and explained that it would take about an hour to adjust to seeing nothing. He was expected to return soon after. After a while, nothing remains for the person. Reflected on his experience, expecting his remaining senses to heighten after losing his sight, but he found that this was not the case. He had promised to return within an hour, yet the wait felt unbearably long. He realizes that he must adapt right away. He began by crawling, then managed to stand and take a few steps, only to stumble and fall repeatedly. Countless martial artists were locked in fierce competition, each striving to earn a place among the 10 demon masters. In such a chaotic atmosphere, an ambush could leave anyone vulnerable, and the consequences of such a surprise attack were impossible to predict. He begins to feel anxious, convinced that someone is watching him. He moved backward and stumbled, losing his balance as his feet tangled beneath him. He collapsed to the ground and claimed that he realized that, without his sight, keeping his balance had become more important than ever. It becomes clear that much more than an hour has passed before Wu finally steps out of the pavilion. He guessed that was probably confused at the moment, but he felt a jolt of surprise when he noticed energetically jumping around. He remarks that it is quite unusual, noting that most trainees tend to wait for their other senses to return after losing one. Darted about energetically, pretending to confront an imaginary opponent as if reacting to something only they could see. Thanks to this advantage, sprints ahead at an impressive speed. He goes so far as to leap over a rock in his path. He completes the vault with flawless precision, prompting Wu to observe that this is likely the method he used to adapt. He had adapted to the pace so rapidly that it now felt completely normal to him. Now the moment had come for him to attempt dodging the blade. As he drew his sword from its scabbard, he lunged ahead with a swift motion. They never witnessed the outcome. The story then jumps ahead 3 days, showing slipping and landing in the mud. He appears with his clothes and skin smeared in soil. Wu drove his hilt forward again, repeating his attack with determined force. The action continued as another strike landed squarely on his chest. He remarks that 3 days have passed and believes should finally begin to question his own actions. He endured the intense training methods without protest, though exhaustion was clearly visible on his face. Wu wondered aloud why no questions were being directed at him, expressing disbelief that he was being completely ignored. He wondered about the best ways to dodge the attacks and tried to understand the ideas behind them. Explained that someone had once told him the heart of the pavilion's martial arts was about achieving personal enlightenment. He simply believed there must be a purpose guiding his actions. Wu feels a sense of astonishment at how effortlessly he managed to gain the other's agreement. She reluctantly admits to herself that he has a valid point. He signaled that they needed to move on and surged ahead with renewed determination. Begins to experience an unfamiliar feeling. He claims that he is truly able to sense it. He realized that he could now track the sword's trajectory as it soared toward him, understanding that observing its movement was the only action left to take. He was unable to evade it because of this. He chooses to defend himself by raising his sword to intercept the incoming attack. He believed this was his sole option moving ahead, and suddenly, tension crackled in the air. He clenches his jaw tightly and speaks with determination. Wu could hardly believe what was happening. He wondered aloud whether he had truly managed to defend against the silent strike after only 3 days. Was suddenly propelled backward through the air. Wu tossed a drink to him. They encouraged to drink it all at once. He expressed his gratitude before raising the cup to his lips and taking a sip. He realized the liquid wasn't truly water, and a sudden surge of energy coursed through him, giving the sensation that his blood, which had once drained away, was now forcefully exiting his body. He sensed something returning and felt puzzled by its nature. Wu explained to him that it was the greatest spring of all. He had spent his whole life saving this spiritual water, and he doubted it would be. He felt as if he had finally encountered the rare genius he had been searching for his whole life. Their training persisted, and the group pressed on. Steps forward, skillfully intercepting each of his opponent's strikes. The progress he had made was clearly visible, showing remarkable improvement. Wu's lips curve into a gentle smile. He urged him to withstand the force of this attack at least once. He raised his arm to strike again, but moved quickly out of the way. Wu quickly moved behind him, dismissing his efforts as insufficient. Pivoted while the other person remained still. He couldn't tell whether he had defended against the strike with his own sword, or if his master had intervened with the hilt of his weapon. Wondered aloud whether he had ceased his assault. Wu let out a laugh as he realized that what he had been searching for had been right in front of him all along. Began to witness her predictions unfolding before her eyes. He regained his sight and announced that his vision had returned. Wu advised him to let go of what had happened and move on. He could aim to join the ranks of the 10 demon masters and train under him as an official disciple in the pavilion. If he chooses this path, his mentor promises to help him rise to become one of the demonic faction's 10 most powerful martial masters within a decade. Reflects on his observations up to this point. He genuinely believes he is telling the truth about that, yet there is still some uncertainty lingering in his mind. It became obvious to him that the person who killed his grandfather was extremely talented, and simply mastering these martial arts would not be enough to bring him any peace. He gathered his determination. He announced his intention to pursue the path of becoming a demon master. Wu's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly composed himself and insisted that it was best to let the matter go. The idea of mastering all 10 demonic sect martial arts was out of reach, even for a prodigy like the grand heavenly demon Ember, who possessed the rare skill to invent his own techniques. Each form of martial arts matches specific body types and energy flows. Regardless of someone's natural talent, they are able to master only 2 or 3 martial arts at most. Focusing entirely on perfecting one technique is considered the quickest path to power within the demonic sect. Apologized, yet remained firm in his decision. Wu considered whether it might be possible to persuade him to think differently. Next, they considered the size. He reassured him that everything was all right, and explained that he would now instruct him in a new form of martial arts. Admits that his understanding is still limited to the fundamentals. Wu explains that the martial arts practiced in his pavilion go beyond mere techniques or lessons. In truth, while he moves at an incredible speed, reacts on impulse alone, successfully deflecting the attack. Wu explains that he has already started working on the fundamental skills. Indicated his understanding just as every sword came crashing down. The attacks directed at him originated from the wild beast path. Expressed her gratitude, but Wu dismissed it, insisting that thanks were unnecessary. He reminded her that he had only been following the Demon Palace's commands. Recalled how he had once received an elixir from him, a gesture of kindness that knew he would always remember. Wu dismissed the matter, urging him to let it go. Wonders aloud about the reason. Wu explained to him that the pavilion operated on a simple principle. Whether it was kindness or resentment, letting go of both was always the wisest path. There is no content to rewrite, as the only provided sentence is choice, and the JSON data is empty. He responds that, if that is true, he will take his leave. He walks into the woods, while Wu wonders aloud about the origins of such a mysterious and powerful figure. It was foretold that a violent storm of blood would soon engulf Hell Island. Reflects on whether his heightened perception stems from mastering the wild beast path, noting that his senses now pick up far more than before. He finds that, even in moments of stillness, the constant flood of awareness leaves him feeling drained. He wouldn't find any real rest in his current state, and mastering control over it was something he had to do. From that moment forward, he would do his best to dull his senses as much as he could. Preventing the droplet from hovering seemed almost impossible, yet as he concentrated on it, his senses appeared to grow less sharp. He believes this will suffice. He unfolded a map and thought about his next destination. He needed to decide on his next destination. The Demon Palace wasn't likely to confine people to Hell Island for endless training, and there was a chance that time was already slipping away. Given the situation, he realized there were no other options left to him. He expresses his desire to visit the demonic sect that was established 700 years prior as a challenge to the powerful heavenly demon emperor. The legendary Sword Emperor, known for his mastery over flames. The most powerful of the 10 demonic sects was his sole remaining choice. He walked directly to the spot and paused in front of the door, reflecting that, when compared to the Beast Pavilion, this place felt different. The place resembles a grand palace. He taps gently on the door. The door opened, and the assistant appeared, wanting to know the identity of the visitor. The character's gaze landed on. Explained that his purpose for arriving was to study the martial arts taught by the Fire Rain Sword sect. The assistant gestures for everyone to come along, explaining that they should follow his lead. Among all the demonic martial arts, the sword techniques practiced in this place stood out as the most extensive. This challenge required the most effort and took longer than any before. The others, who had started days earlier, had already finished the basic test and advanced to the next level. They wondered aloud about why he had arrived so late, questioning if there was a specific reason for his delayed appearance after more than 2 weeks. Explained that his recent studies took place at the Beast Pavilion, but the assistant doubted that he could have mastered the wild beast path in such a short period. Insisted that he had completed the task. The assistant acknowledged remarkable intelligence, but doubted that he could have accomplished so much in just 2 weeks. It was most probable that Wu, feeling irritated, brushed him off without much thought, though there was no. He stepped forward and introduced himself as claiming responsibility for overseeing the beginner trial. He then inquired if anyone needed assistance. He wondered whether pursuing the fire-rain sword technique was truly his goal, since perhaps choosing a different challenge would suit him better. Acknowledged the other person's concern, expressing gratitude, but explained that his goal was to master the sword techniques taught by the fire-rain sword sect. Responds by indicating that, if that is indeed the situation. He brought his foot down hard on the ground, unleashing a powerful shockwave that rippled outward. A scroll suddenly dropped from the ceiling, and he explained that this was the basic introduction and the practical technique. He needed to learn the 13 forms and dedicate himself to practicing them. Looked at the object with a puzzled expression, wondering to himself how he was expected to accomplish the task. Suspects that he might be admitting his inability to understand a sword manual. Admits that he genuinely has no idea. He never had any training in swordsmanship before arriving at this place, which left in disbelief and questioning whether he was being truthful. Wondered aloud whether had really never studied swordsmanship at any point in his life, and confirmed that this was indeed the case. Agreed that it was logical, noting that the records showed he had never used a particular sword technique. Yet, despite this fact, found it troubling that he was unable to accomplish even that much. Even the simplest concepts seemed puzzling. In contrast, taking into account his sharp eye for detail and the way he handled himself during the second trial, along with the clever judgment he showed when selecting the cave dorm. The idea came to mind that, since he was like a blank canvas, the right guidance could help him achieve results no one had seen before. Admits that, although he is unable to see sword steps, he is certainly able to read and write. He begins to read aloud from the text, which describes a sensation of complete relaxation spreading gently throughout the body. Their movements needed to merge seamlessly, requiring a relaxed and flexible approach to swordsmanship. Most importantly, he had to keep his core and waist loose to achieve this fluidity. Wondered aloud if this was the correct way and showed an example, while felt disbelief that he needed to explain such simple things, especially when he was supposed to be choosing one of the 10 demon masters. He instructs the other to adjust his posture, noting that when his body is rigid, his core tightens too. The importance of maintaining self-control becomes clear. Immediately follows the instruction, allowing his thoughts to settle and his mind to become calm, blending gently into a peaceful state. Questioned whether his words had been immediately understood after he finished speaking. He insists that his stance is already good enough, and promises to instruct him in the fire-rain 13 forms. Without hesitation, they began reviewing the material repeatedly, with present to support his advancement and offering an encouraging thumbs up. Began skillfully connecting the pieces in a continuous flow, showing clear signs that he had finally mastered the foundational techniques. Observed the situation and concluded that it matched his expectations, recognizing the boy's remarkable talent. He instructs to picture an opponent standing before him and to demonstrate all 13 forms. Wonders aloud if the imagined foe could be anyone, to which confirms it can. Then explains that this challenge serves as the test required for advancement to the intermediate chain. The purpose was to observe how his fundamental techniques revealed traces of sword intent. He realized the chance arrived sooner than he had expected. He understood that this was his chance to show everyone what he was capable of. He spreads his feet apart and declares his intentions. He is required to picture an adversary that he has to overcome. He focused intensely while drawing his sword from its sheath. He unleashed the initial move of the 13 techniques, known as Peerless Wind. Appeared startled at its next action. He gets ready for the second one and smoothly moves on to the third. Observed the method known as foggy drifting clouds and wondered if this was truly the fire he had heard about. 13 raindrops began to take shape, emerging from the misty haze. Clouds typically refers to a sword technique marked by its gentle nature and lively energy. The movement ought to resemble the gentle drifting of clouds and the quiet spreading of fog, yet the actual execution differs from this ideal. He notices that the way he uses it feels unusually precise, and he questions whether he is intentionally altering it. Altering the fundamental motions of a sword style that has been handed down through the ages is something only a true can achieve. The modified sword techniques carried a deadly aura, as though he stood before the very foes who had wronged his master or family. Found himself astonished, realizing that the sword techniques of the Fire Rain sword sect, regarded as the most traditional among sword arts, had been transformed in such an unexpected way. This left him deeply curious about the experiences that had shaped this young person's life. Found the situation unusual, noticing that the energy at his fingertips was now controlling the direction of the sword's movement on its own. He wonders whether the wild beast path is the cause. With each use of the Fire Rain 13 forms, his instincts along the wild beast path became increasingly acute. He aimed to merge both techniques fully, knowing that if he succeeded, the resulting swordsmanship would become something entirely new and no longer resemble the Fire Rain 13 form. He realized he had to move quickly and get back to mastering the fundamental sword techniques. At that moment, he suddenly stops moving. The pretend foe he battled began to shift and alter its form. He transformed himself to resemble the foe responsible for his grandfather's death. His heartbeat suddenly races out of control. He clenches his jaw tightly and lunges ahead. He advanced by employing the 7th move from the 13 forms, known as Overturning 4, and brought his weapon down in a powerful swing. His imagined foe quickly moved out of the way, causing him to strike at empty air. He claims to be quick, yet despite unleashing a relentless series of attacks, none of his strikes manage to connect. He boasts about being the quickest fighter he's ever faced. In response, his opponent begins to remove his clothes. They slid their sword back into its cover, then aimed a sharp, direct strike at its head. Barely avoided the attack, explaining that he was unable to do so. He found no room to evade, so he relied on every bit of skill he still possessed. In one swift motion, he lifts his sword high behind his back. Standing behind him, the figure insists that he must release everything he's holding back. Urged on, he unleashes a relentless stream of attacks, one after another without pause. His master's adversary offered a sly grin and lifted his hand into the air. They lifted their weapon, bringing it up in a swift motion that sliced cleanly through the opposing blade. Both of his arms were severed. All of his connections were cut, rendering him utterly powerless. Lets out a piercing scream, her voice echoing through the air. Beads of sweat dripped onto the floor while he remained utterly absorbed in his spiritual practice. He prepared to battle, but suddenly his grip loosened and his sword slipped from his hand. Admitted that, although he was ultimately defeated, this experience allowed him to succeed in the end. The elementary chamber evaluated his grasp of swordsmanship and his overall comprehension. In an actual battle, the 13 forms were put into action. He flicked his sword upward, sending it spinning through the air before snatching it back into his grasp. He demonstrated beyond doubt that his mastery of the Fire Rain 13 forms was remarkable, and it was clear he was ready to move forward into the intermediate chamber. Thought it was probably quite irritating. It was a challenge for him to instruct a person who was completely unfamiliar with the art of sword fighting. He patiently demonstrated each step too, who expressed her gratitude by bowing respectfully to him. Expressed his determination to put in even more effort as he moved ahead. In addition, it became clear that his sword possessed certain unique qualities. He sensed a powerful urge to kill, and realized he needed to stay calm and not let it disturb his composure. Appeared to be reminding himself of that and wished to do the same. Before moving on to the intermediate chamber, expressed his understanding of the situation. He really had managed to master the wild beast path in only a few weeks. He had only been training for a few weeks, yet his rapid progress allowed him to advance to the intermediate chamber much sooner than anyone had anticipated. As he steps inside, the scene unfolds just as he had anticipated. He entered the room, uncertain at first if he would be able to reach his goal. Now, however, he knows for sure. By the time everything concluded, the instructor at the intermediate chamber became completely fascinated by Cell. The instructor remarked to others that the analyst possessed such intelligence that even Brother Sick had a scent reminiscent of toast. He reflects on the strange contrast between his old job, where he was looked down upon for washing dead bodies, and his current life, where taking lives with a sword earns him respect. An elderly instructor greets him warmly, mentioning that he has already heard of his reputation. The instructor gestures for him to take a seat, noting that the lesson is just about to start. The instructor informed the group that, due to the arrival of a new trainee, he would be providing an explanation of the central reading of the Fire Rain Sword along with the 7 core teachings. He went over the main ideas, emphasizing that strength needed to be evenly spread throughout the body. He reminded them to pay attention to maintaining a steady stance. He demonstrated by drawing his chest inward and arching his back outward, cautioning against pouring all their force into just one strike. Recognized these concepts and acknowledged that his understanding of them was only possible because he had studied the advanced martial arts taught in the intermediate hall. The instructor concluded the spoken lesson and signaled for it to come along. Quietly trailed after the instructor, and together they made their way to a peaceful garden. The instructor, gripping a leafy branch in hand, told Soul that it was possible for someone without a sword to surpass someone who wielded one. He went on to clarify that at this advanced stage, an individual no longer required an actual sword to master the art of swordsmanship. Without warning, the instructor lunged at Unsoul, wielding the branch as a weapon. The instructor came to a sudden halt and posed an imaginary scenario to the class. He wondered aloud how he might defend himself with sword-fighting techniques if he were ambushed without a sword in hand. He explained that during Soul's time in the intermediate hall, the trainees present had studied the shining mysticism and mastered the initial technique of the Fire Rain Sword, and now they were engaged in a discussion about its underlying theory. He cautions the other person that a lack of understanding will mean no further instruction, urging him to consider the question thoughtfully before responding. Pondered what it would mean if he stood without a sword in his grasp. He responds by explaining that he plans to fight using his adversary's own sword. Unsoul lunged ahead, making a swift attempt to grab the branch out of the instructor's grasp. However, the instructor remarks that his decision was made too quickly. Unsoul is caught off guard when the instructor suddenly materializes right behind him without warning. Unsoul made several attempts to reach the instructor, yet the instructor skillfully avoided every move without any difficulty. Unsoul grew increasingly annoyed by his inability to follow the instructor's swift motions. Understanding that his place in the advanced hall depended on making a strong impression, he resolved to unleash the full capability of the wandering beast path. Focusing intently, Unsoul tried to sense the rhythm and trajectory of the instructor's every move. Unsoul sharpens his awareness, concentrating intently on everything around him. The instructor gathered his energy and hurled aside just as reached for the branch, sending him crashing to the ground before he could launch another attack. Before Unsoul could rise, the instructor intercepted him, bursting into laughter as he declared Unsoul had successfully completed the test. Unsoul, clearly puzzled, wonders how he managed to succeed despite never making contact. The instructor informed Unsoul that his lessons in shining mysticism would begin the next day, requesting that he arrive early in the morning before anyone else. Unsoul accepted the request. Once departed, the instructor turned his attention to the branch he was holding. He reflects inwardly, realizing that even as a young one, a wolf's true nature never changes. A smile spreads across his face, as he expresses his high hopes for the other person. Once the day's lesson concluded, chose to wander around Hell Island for a while. He reflected on the events of the second test, realizing that tensions were so high a conflict could erupt at any time in this place. Without warning, he becomes aware that a group of people is close by. He begins to tally them up. He spots 5 individuals emerging from the trees. The one at the front steps forward, confronting him about his odd behavior since leaving the intermediate hall, and declares that they intend to put him in his place. One of them pointed out that had been the first to begin the violence, so he had no right to fault them for what was coming next. Their leader proudly declared that all 5 of them were exceptionally talented, recognized as the 5 peak swords, and warned to get ready for what lay ahead. Unsol realizes in his mind that someone else is present. The head of the 5 peak swords raises their voice, directing a sharp reprimand toward Unsol. Without warning, the leader collapsed lifelessly at the feet of his stunned companions. Just then, a young man with striking red hair, known as Jinha, made his entrance. The character turns to Sol and indicates that a conversation is necessary. Jinha's sudden arrival caught the rest of the 5 peak swords off guard, prompting them to question his unexpected presence. Unfazed, Jinha commanded them to depart, making it clear he had no interest in dealing with those he considered beneath him. His words sparked their anger, yet they chose to retreat for now, silently promising themselves that they would come back in the future to seek revenge. Unsol considers the young man to be powerful, whereas accuses the others of lacking courage. Shifted his attention toward. She turns to him and demands to know where his loyalties lie. Earlier, inside the advanced training hall, the instructor addressed his students, informing them that they had all grasped the basics of the Fire Rain Sword's first technique. However, he explained that genuine mastery would only be achieved once each student personalized the move. Finally, he declared that the moment had come to witness the unique fiery raindrops each of them had formed. The instructor directed Unsol to begin demonstrating his technique. Sol moved ahead, taking a step forward. He proceeds to showcase how he performs the technique in his own unique way. The character showcased swift and lethal sword techniques with impressive skill. The instructor observes that Sol's movements are both steady and accurate, noting that each action carries a strong sense of lethal intent. He permitted him to go back to his seat and then summoned Jinha. Jinha moved ahead, but chose not to use the opening move of the Fire Rain Sword. He unveils a unique method, clearly crafted to neutralize and overcome the strategy used by Sol. Unsol comes to the unsettling conclusion that the warning was meant for him. As their confrontation resumed, he found himself pondering once more over the significance behind earlier questioning which side he truly belonged to. Jinha raises his voice insisting that he stop pretending to be clueless. As Jinha observes face and listens to his tone, he realizes that truly seems confused and unaware of the situation, rather than trying to deceive anyone. Jinha comes to the understanding that Unsol is not the individual he has been searching for. He felt let down, having expected to enjoy himself, and decided that from now on, Sol should stop behaving in such an irritating manner. He warned that further annoyance would result in the same deadly fate, then walked away. Sol came to the conclusion that Jinha was acting as a spy, realizing that the situation was far more complicated than he had first believed. He believes he understands that not all of the people in this place are striving to join the ranks of the 10 demon lords. He comes to understand that, while the chance to master the skills of the 10 demonic sects is extraordinary, the way the competition was organized left much to be desired. After considering the situation, he realizes that this incredible chance is also set up as a snare, designed to lure in and capture something. He begins to suspect that someone in the group might be secretly working against them. He chooses to ignore the situation, feeling that it makes no difference to him. No matter if the other person is a spy or a demonic martial artist, he knows that, in the end, this is just another enemy he must face. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he reflected on how everything was about to start. A short distance away, a mouse finds itself ensnared within a trap. Inside the training hall, The instructor declared that the day's session would be the final one, signaling the conclusion of their training. He recognizes that many students probably found learning the laws tedious, but he points out that even the greatest masters, after facing numerous battles, dedicate time to studying martial arts laws and principles. He clarifies that merely being familiar with a martial art does not guarantee the ability to execute it, and being able to perform it does not necessarily indicate a deep understanding. He conveys his hope that the analysis of these laws, which he has shared with them, will mark the beginning of their journey in the world of. After offering them well wishes, a bell unexpectedly chimed. A commanding voice filled the air as the instructor declared that the moment had arrived, directing everyone to make their way toward the rocky mountains situated at the heart of the island. The group of trainees assembled at the foot of the mountain. Head instructor took a moment to verify that all participants were present, declared that the third test was about to begin. The explanation is given that everyone must fight one another, continuing until just 10 individuals are left alive. He warned them that, although they might choose to hide or escape for now, eventually their efforts would be in vain. Over time, the spaces available for them to remain would become limited. Anyone found within the restricted zone would meet their end at the hands of deadly demons. Senses an intense aura of hostility radiating from the demons and quickly deduces that their combat skills must be extraordinary. Meanwhile, a trainee inquires whether it is permissible to launch an attack against the lethal demons. Burst into laughter, clearly delighted by the ambition displayed by the candidates before him. He assures them that it is possible to engage in battle with these foes, and if they are able, to defeat them completely. He went on to announce an incredible incentive. Anyone who managed to defeat a killing demon would be instantly elevated to the rank of one of the 10 demon lords. The trainees came to understand that defeating a single demon would be a far greater challenge than overcoming any of their fellow competitors. Pointed out that the participants had the option to work together as allies or to lay traps for one another. Raising their voice, the character insisted that taking a life was necessary, no matter the price, if that was truly their desire. This was the journey required for anyone who wished to rise among the ranks of the 10 demon lords. The moment the exam starts, the trainees rush off, each heading a different way. Unsol darts forward with urgency, suddenly aware that speed is essential. He was aware that numerous trainees had noticed him by now. He realized that unless he escaped right away, there was a strong chance he would be ambushed by a group, just as he had been in the past. Unsol realizes that his priority is to find shelter, and he determines that the Wandering Beast Pavilion offers him the greatest security. He rushes at top speed toward the building he knows so well. As he continued walking, he became aware that the ground beneath his feet felt different than before. Without warning, he senses the approach of another person. A young man, clearly injured, suddenly bursts onto the scene, desperately calling out for assistance and insisting that his life is in danger from someone pursuing him. He promises a reward in exchange for aid, causing to suspect a possible deception. However, the evidence of the young man's genuine injuries convinces that the threat is real. Notice the presence of 3 individuals in pursuit and questioned whether they might be working together as a group. Although he wishes to remain uninvolved, he comes to the understanding that the arrival of this young man threatens to expose where he is hiding. At the final second, drags the young man alongside him, disappearing together into a concealed pit beneath the earth. The trio of pursuers reached the location, scanning the area in confusion as they questioned how their target could have vanished so quickly, firmly believing escape was impossible. The leader made up his mind to eliminate his enemy no matter what. Believing that their target was still nearby, he instructed his group to spread out and begin searching for him. Once the others had gone, and the young man climbed out of their hiding place, the young man expressed his gratitude to, explaining that he owed his survival to him. Wondered if the whole had a greater purpose than just concealment, suspecting that Master had created it with him in mind. Recalled that during his time in the pit, his awareness along the wandering beast path had grown sharper and stretched farther than it normally did. He detected the pressure of their feet striking the earth and the movement of their swords, picking up every detail through the subtle tremors that traveled through the ground. Sensed the world with remarkable clarity, as though he was viewing it firsthand. In that moment, he understood that he was experiencing the wandering beast path, which relied on vibrations, a lesson Master had intended for him to learn. He shifted his attention toward the young man. The young man revealed his identity as Gum from the blood sect and inquired about the other person's name. Saul chose not to respond and began walking off, while hurried after him, urging Saul not to leave so quickly. As soon as the third test started, had escaped into the forest, but his pursuers had tracked him without pause. He wonders aloud if he might accompany Unsol, explaining to himself that Unsol seems reliable since he offered help in hiding. Receiving no objection, he interprets Unsol's quietness as agreement and cheerfully follows along at his side. Without warning, the distant air filled with the clamor of an intense fight. Saul pointed out to his companion that fighting was happening in that area and suggested they look for a different path. Impressed by Saul's skill in sensing vibrations, expressed his amazement and asked if Saul could show him how to do it as well. Close by, a solitary warrior confronts several adversaries at once, determined to honor his fallen friends with vengeance, no matter what price he must pay. A single word, revenge, reverberated through Unsol's thoughts while he recognized a well-known hatred radiating from the fighter before him. Noticed something was off and questioned about it. In response, revealed that their plans had changed and declared that they would now take part in the upcoming battle, leaving visibly stunned. Unsol moved forward, closing the distance to where the fight was taking place. He quickly deflects an unexpected strike that comes his way. The assassin's eyes widened in shock as he struggled to understand how had managed to counter the secret technique meant to hide him completely. Doubt crept into his mind, and he questioned whether might also be a skilled assassin. With swift precision, expertly eliminates the would-be killer. Unsol recalled how effortlessly he had defeated one of the assassins, realizing that their stealthy technique might have caused him trouble if he hadn't mastered the wandering beast path. At the same time, let out a terrified scream when she saw the blood. Believes that assisting the fighter in eliminating the assassins could be beneficial. He considered whether to share with him the emotions that came with accomplishing revenge. The assassins made up their minds to finish the fight without delay. One of them stepped forward and informed the lone fighter that, because he was the last survivor, he would grant him a swift death out of respect. Just as he was about to strike, stepped in and stopped the attack. The assassins stared in disbelief, their minds racing to figure out the stranger's origin and whether more foes might be lurking nearby. They come to the conclusion that must also be eliminated. A violent struggle erupts, during which manages to take the life of one of his opponents. Unsol joined forces with the avenging fighter, battling together against the group of assassins. They eliminate each opponent individually until none remain. Crimson droplets spray across the scene, painting everything in sight. The vengeful warrior struck down the remaining assassin with a decisive finishing move. The man erupted into wild laughter, his face and clothes smeared with crimson stains. He softly confided that his long-awaited revenge was complete before collapsing to the floor. Turned to and wondered aloud if everything had finally come to an end. Just then walked up to, acknowledging his impressive abilities but cautioning him to remain vigilant and not become complacent. Without warning, he launched a surprise assault, drawing a concealed dagger and striking at his unsuspecting opponent. Unsol effortlessly deflects the incoming blow. Stared in disbelief, trying to comprehend how his opponent had managed to halt his advance. Saul blamed, insisting that everything that happened was because of him. Due to that person, he missed his chance to question the other warrior. When learned about this, fear gripped him as he demanded to know more. Saul revealed that he had suspected the truth all along. He went on to clarify that, during the time they spent concealed underground, he had noticed secretly carrying an extra set of weapons beneath his clothing. He mentions that the unusual stiffness in the way he moved his back made it obvious. Admits that his decision to keep the other person by his side, no matter the circumstances, stemmed from a desire to observe his actions out of curiosity. He believed that watching how someone attempted to trick others might benefit him later on. Could not accept the accusation, firmly maintaining that his performance had been flawless. With urgency driving his actions, he flung every last concealed weapon he had at. Moved swiftly, avoiding strike without effort. Noticed an odd sensation during the pursuit, and began to question whether Saul might be able to anticipate his actions. Unsol moved with agility, evading every concealed weapon that came flying toward him. At that moment, someone struck. Unsol explains to him that even the finest concealed weapons lose their value once they are exposed. Made a frantic dash toward Saul, driven by one last surge of desperation. Saul swiftly intervened, bringing the confrontation to a close by defeating. Unsol, his body smeared with blood, reflected on the difficulty of the battle, realizing that his prior knowledge of the concealed weapons had spared him from grave danger. He observes as body grows still, witnessing the last traces of life fade away. He observes that man's expression, recognizing the familiar longing for life he has witnessed in everyone at the moment of their death. Unsol turned his back on the aftermath, moving past the fallen assassins and the vengeful fighter's lifeless form. As he paused beside the fighter's body, he observed something unusual about him. The man's life ended, while a gentle smile lingered on his lips. Unsol pondered what it must feel like to finally get revenge. He questioned if, when his own moment arrived, he would be able to smile with the same satisfaction. Unsol picked up the fallen assassin's swords and resumed his journey. From afar, one of the murderous demons kept a close eye on Unsol. The thought crosses their mind, making them suspect that Unsol might be responsible for what happened. A different demon remarked that Sol had defeated the skilled assassins solely by relying on the fundamental skills taught by the Fire Rain Sword sect. He recognized his own talent, yet he noted that many others around him possessed just as much skill. He understood that unless he got better, living through Hell Island would be impossible for him. The following day is pursued by a crowd of trainees. One opponent wielded a metal whip, striking at others from afar. Skillfully evaded an incoming strike. As the weapon soared through the air, it suddenly shifted direction and struck him from behind. Comes to the grim conclusion that his pursuers are relentless, and unless he discovers an escape, his life will soon be in danger. At the same time, events were unfolding at the instructor's campsite. The head instructor requested an update from one of the staff members. In response, he was informed that only 41 out of the original 86 trainees had survived. Head instructor expressed astonishment at the number of survivors remaining after 3 days had passed. He determines that the people left are likely quite talented and realizes the moment has come to put their abilities to the test. Turning to his assistant, he requests the map. In another part of the island, a trainee prepared to strike, having just taken his sword from him. Once again, Unsol was forced to flee, as those chasing him closed in. He believes that the kinds of weapons being used would put him at a disadvantage if he fought out in the open. He devises a strategy that suits his circumstances. At the same time, head instructor studied the map before making the decision to shrink the boundaries of the combat zone. He then commanded that the killing demons be released into the territory of the Fire Rain Sword sect. Made his way directly toward the grand structure belonging to the Fire Rain Sword sect. He slipped through the doorway, and those chasing him hurried in after. The group chasing him suspects he might be concealed within, and one member taunts him, believing he has no way out. Their leader feels certain that, regardless of his speed, escape is impossible. Without warning, launched a surprise attack from behind, catching them off guard. The leader dismissed him as a fool, convinced that the attempt was nothing more than a childish ruse they would never be deceived by. Confronted the opponents head-on, deftly dodging each strike from their weapons throughout the clash. The leader stood in shock, unable to comprehend how this opponent could so easily anticipate the movements of their sword techniques. Takes full advantage of the confusion and the tight, winding hallways surrounding him. He fiercely battles those who are chasing after him. One of the pursuers comes to understand that the dense crowd around them diminishes the strength of their attacks. Before he could complete his thought, Unsol ended his life. In his last few seconds, the pursuer comes to the grim understanding that Unsol had intentionally led them into this situation. Observes that the confined area limits his opponents, causing their attacks to lose strength and become easier to anticipate. He also realizes that their abilities are not particularly impressive. He reasons that he could overcome them if he faces each opponent individually. A member of the group chasing after them let out a yell and lunged forward to strike. Swiftly evaded the oncoming attacker. A second foe lashed out with a whip, yet the weapon rebounded off the wall and struck instead. The impact knocked him off balance, sending him crashing to the ground. One of the people chasing them noticed a chance to get away and urgently signaled to the rest, urging everyone to act quickly so they could flee the area. Just as the one being chased is about to get away, he comes to an abrupt halt. He found himself halted by an unexpected presence. The person regards them with a frosty demeanor, inquiring about their actions and questioning whether they are attempting to escape. From afar, observed the scene unfold. Once the fighter defeated the remaining pursuers he faced, wanting to know whether was the one in charge. The fighter admired Unsol's impressive abilities, then inquired whether the technique Unsol had performed before was known as the Fire Rain Sword. The murderer revealed that he was called Wu and wanted to know what Sol's name was. Earlier, Moon Xiang had raised his voice at his subordinates, demanding to know whether they intended to flee. One member of the group responded with uncertainty, admitting that they believed fighting there was unwise. Moon, seething with fury at their lack of courage, swiftly ends every one of their lives in an instant. He silently scorned his co-workers, blaming their lack of advancement for his disdain toward working with them. Returning to the present, right before Sol can respond, Moon bursts into laughter. He declares with amusement that the name of someone destined to die holds no interest for him. Launched a powerful assault against Unsol, displaying fierce determination. Attempted to defend himself, but the whip coiled tightly around his sword, and his opponent easily snapped the blade in two. Moon taunted him, remarking that the only thing the advanced hall of the Fire Rain Sword sect had supposedly taught was a single defensive move. Unsol's eyes widened in astonishment as curiosity sparked within him, questioning how his adversary had learned of the radiant mysticism. There was also the question of whether an information network existed around him, operating without his knowledge. Launched another assault against his opponent. She chastised him for letting his mind wander during their battle, and their confrontation grew even more fierce. Unsol comes to the shocking realization that his adversary is leaving a trail of destruction wherever he goes. She realized that battling someone of his caliber in a confined area offered no benefit. Unsol stepped back, putting more space between herself and the other person. Moon shows clear signs of being let down. He pointed out to that, given's current abilities, he stood no chance against him. Moon launched a fierce assault, swinging his chain weapon with full force. A web closed in on from every side, leaving no path for escape. He mockingly wonders aloud whether this might be the other man's final attempt to resist. He doubted that relying on a defensive move, such as the shining mysticism, would be enough to protect him. He is left in shock as he notices that Unsol remains upright. Sol succeeded in escaping the trap that Moon had created using his weapon. Moon let out a laugh, silently promising himself that he would end the other man's life before long. Unsol assessed the circumstances and understood that by using the radiant mysticism, he could defend himself against the incoming attacks. However, he also recognized that his strength was not sufficient to halt them entirely. In that instant, his mind flashes back to his lessons, and he understands exactly what is necessary at this point. The force was so strong that it could pierce through solid steel. Sol gathered his strength, channeling it with intense concentration, before launching a powerful assault that caught Moon Xiang entirely off guard. The attack breaks through his guard, leaving him stunned and unable to react. Caught her breath, exhaustion evident after the intense fight. He recalled the moment when he responded to Moon's assault by unleashing a powerful burst of energy, releasing a surge of lightning and thunder unlike anything seen before. he unleashed a powerful move that utterly destroyed his adversary. Reflects on the technique, recognizing that it truly holds great strength, just as the instructor had claimed. He began to cough up blood, quickly understanding that the technique was far beyond his current abilities, and that he was unable to control it without consequence. He feels a wave of relief after his victory, yet he quickly notices that the fight lasted longer than expected, and the restricted areas are about to shift, forcing him to hurry onward. Without warning, he becomes aware that another person is nearby. He feels confused as he tries to understand how he ended up in this unfamiliar place. He comes to an abrupt halt, his body rigid with shock, as a murderous demon appears directly before him. Questions the presence of a deadly demon in this place, uncertain if the area has been declared off-limits because of his ongoing battle. He realized that his current situation was not the result of avoiding a confrontation, and questioned whether he would be permitted to depart without conflict. Noticing the demon's silence, he concludes it is safe for him to go. Unsoul attempts to move past the person standing in his way. Without warning, the demon lunged at him from behind, striking with rapid speed. Envisions a scenario where, if he doesn't manage to avoid the attack, the blade will slice through his neck. At the very last moment, managed to avoid the strike and came to the realization that his survival was only thanks to the unpredictable route taken by the wandering beast. He swung his sword through empty air, unable to detect even the faintest trace of his adversary. Meanwhile, unsoul himself for the impending clash. He realizes he must not let his opponent's calm appearance fool him, understanding that any attempt to move would prompt the demon to strike without hesitation. Unsoul recalled a lesson from realizing that even though a predator might be quicker, catching its prey is never simple. The explanation for this is that the prey travels in a winding, zigzag pattern. However, creatures at the top of the food chain never fail to capture their prey. They strike instantly as soon as their target shows any sign of movement. Pondered the best way to confront an adversary like this, his mind drifting back to recall the remainder of the lesson. The predator would choose to strike when the moment was just right. The answer, then, was for him to move in ways that no one could foresee. Chooses to put this approach into action. He begins his movement, weaving in a zigzag pattern that anyone watching could easily anticipate. He skillfully evades the anticipated strikes by moving along the wandering beast path. At last, he waits for the perfect opportunity and surprises his opponent by breaking through their defense with a move no one saw coming. Unsoul stands frozen, overwhelmed by disbelief. The deadly demon paused in front of him, looming silently for a brief moment. Unsoul believes that there is no hope left for him, and that his fate is already sealed. His eyes widened with surprise as the demon suddenly halted its assault and began to retreat. Confusion filled his mind as he questioned what had made the demon stop, and he wondered if he had unknowingly stepped past the edge of the forbidden zone. As he reflected on the battle, he recognized that avoiding the oncoming blows had taken every ounce of his strength, but despite his efforts, he failed to find any weakness in his adversary's defense. He realizes that what he is witnessing reveals the skill of a true master, and suddenly understands how limited his own perspective has been. Like a frog living at the bottom of a well, unaware of the immense world and the strength of those who live in it. He realized that the martial arts used to slay demons were far beyond anything he could comprehend. He realized that the person who had killed his grandfather must have abilities equal to his own. He became even more determined, realizing that he needed to exceed this level of skill if he hoped to get his revenge. Without warning, a new figure stepped into view and addressed him directly, using his complete name, Unsoul from the Bow family. The individual explained that he had spent some time searching for him, mentioning that he had heard news of him mastering the wandering beast path. Unsoul realizes that this man speaks with a familiarity that suggests he knows him, much like the others have, leading Unsoul to understand that word about him has gotten around. The man starts to say his name, but then pauses, mocking the situation by remarking that there is no point in sharing his identity with someone who will not live much longer. Without warning, the character suddenly initiated an unexpected assault. dodged the strike with little effort. The attacker couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration for Unsol's skill, realizing that Unsol had managed to foresee the direction of the assault using his sharp, animal-like instincts. He expresses his confidence that the other will one day join the ranks of the 10 demon lords. Because of this particular reason, he realized he had to end the boy's life immediately, striking before the demon within could fully awaken. Unsol observes a sudden and complete shift in the way his opponent's energy moves. He recalls that some people on the island have no interest in joining the ranks of the 10 demon lords, and begins to question whether this man might be among those individuals. He pushes aside any stray thoughts, determined to concentrate fully on the battle ahead. Amid their fierce battle, as each strike was traded between them, Unsol experienced an unfamiliar feeling that caught him off guard. He felt an unusual force drawing him closer. Recalls a moment when his grandfather taught him an important lesson. He went on to clarify that during their investigation, they discovered one of the victims had fallen to the deadly 5-bladed strikes unique to the clan. The elder recognized this method because, despite the absence of visible injuries, every bone in the body had been broken, a signature effect of the technique, which channels Kai through the opponent during each strike. In the current moment, Saul cried out as he suddenly understood that the move confronting him was the renowned 5 cutting tiger blades, a signature technique of the clan. His opponent stood in shock, unable to believe that his fighting style had been recognized so quickly. Recalls his grandfather's teachings about a special ability within this technique, a formidable absorption power that works like a swirling vortex, drawing everything nearby into its grasp. Practitioners of this technique use it during every exchange to manipulate and take control of their opponent's weapon. And Saul recalled the lesson his grandfather once shared, describing how the clan battled fiercely like tigers, seizing moments of confusion to overpower and consume their opponents' swords entirely. The young Unsol turned to his grandfather, his curiosity evident as he wondered whether their clan held the most power. In response, the grandfather explained that their absorption technique, while clever, came with significant risks. He pointed out that this skill required its user to approach enemies closely, making it as dangerous for the wielder as it was for their foes. In the current moment, chooses to take advantage of the absorption technique. He maneuvered his rival's blade so that its point faced back toward its wielder. Representing the clan, announced his intent to challenge his rival with complete sincerity and determination. He swears on behalf of his clan that he will destroy the demon's lineage. At that moment, launched his assault. Suddenly drove his sword into the earth, catching off guard with this unpredictable action. Using the sword as a support, swung around and delivered a powerful kick to, causing him to stumble and lose his footing. He notices that his strategy is succeeding. Grew frustrated, leveling accusations at and claiming that relied on underhanded tactics. Believed his strategy had succeeded, yet he noticed that it barely harmed his opponent, a result that was understandable given how many years his adversary had spent honing their skills. However, he had now figured out a way to defend himself against his opponent. Recalled a teaching from his master, emphasizing the importance of patience in battle. His master had explained that the secret to real speed was not to make the first move, but to react just a split second quicker than the opponent when the clash finally began. Resolved to counter his opponent by applying the energy absorption technique, aiming to increase his own speed. Launched another assault, yet Saul chose to yield to the force, drawing him in rather than fight against it. Rather than resisting, he moves along with it. He channeled the force of his movement to make his sword swing faster. At the final instant, he shifts the path of his assault. He strikes and manages to hit his target. Stared in disbelief, his mind racing as he questioned whether Saul had managed to use the energy absorption technique for his own benefit. He considers it unattainable, knowing his own skill can draw a rock from afar, a feat that even master swordsmen struggle to control with precision. He refuses to believe that someone as young as could be responsible and launches another attack against him using the same tactic. Unsol believes it is pointless, since greater absorption only increases in strength. As his speed increased, His sword moved with even greater swiftness. Raised his voice in exasperation, questioning internally how much longer expected this strategy to be effective. Without warning, Sol realizes that his adversary has stopped relying on the energy absorption method. Explains that there is no need to use that technique against an opponent of his caliber. Charges ahead, launching himself straight into an aggressive assault. Sol believes that this is the opportunity he has long anticipated. Himself and unleashed the initial move of the Fire Rain Sword technique. The Radiant Enigma. He responds with a fierce and overwhelming counterstrike. Seizing the opportunity when his rival lowers his guard, he takes swift action. With a decisive strike, the character brings down for good. Dropped to his knees, his face filled with astonishment as he wondered aloud whether the technique he had just witnessed was the legendary Shining Mysticism. Sol responded with a calm affirmation, confirming his suspicion. The action had been risky and carried significant danger. Believed that to transform the soul-lethal strike within the defensive, Radiant Mysticism technique into a powerful offensive maneuver, he needed to intentionally attract every other assault from his adversary onto himself. Appeared genuinely surprised, admitting that he had never considered understanding the technique from that perspective. Afterward, he turned to Sol and questioned whether Sol intended to walk away. Responds by calmly stating that he does not play a role in the other person's pursuit of revenge. Grew curious, intrigued by the possibility of someone like Sol appearing among the demonic sect. Meanwhile, Sol expressed a desire not to cross paths with in the future. The person departs shortly afterward. Fell to the ground, weakened by his wounds. As he struggled, a new figure emerged silently behind him. Sensing the presence, wondered aloud if this stranger had come to end his life. A masked demon, known for taking lives, turned his attention to the demon remarked on surprising usefulness, given his origins in the Orthodox sects, and expressed regret that such a capable person had to meet an untimely end. Came to the unsettling conclusion that his identity as a spy had been exposed from the very start. The demon then warned him, pointing out that he had misjudged the power of the Devil's Palace. He bid farewell before ending the other man's life. Somewhere else on the island, events were unfolding. A trainee sprinted as fast as he could, desperate to escape danger and protect himself. Jinha methodically extracted the weapons that had been lodged in her body, removing them one after another. She slowly rises to her feet, breath coming in short gasps, her body marked by fresh wounds. A band of challengers stood in her path, and their leader remarked that misfortune had found her. He taunted her, questioning whether she truly believed she could get away after being infected with the rare and deadly blood fortress poison, and insisted that she was hopeless unless she possessed the cure. Jinha silently blamed her misfortune, realizing for the first time that a well-organized group operated in the shadows, wielding concealed weapons and deadly poisons. She understood that handling such a threat on her own was beyond her abilities. Jinha's challengers observed that she gripped her sword with her left hand, prompting them to question whether she intended to battle them using that hand. The leader explained that, despite her impressive abilities, it was impossible for a right-handed swordsman to instantly master fighting with her left hand. He recommended that she give up. Both of them launched their assault on her at the same time. Jinha managed to drive her attackers away with unexpected agility, though she sustained a wound on her arm during the struggle. She suddenly becomes aware that a second poison needle has struck her, and understands that without an antidote in the next 15 minutes, her life will come to an end. Injured and encircled by her enemies, she contemplates giving up. Without warning, a scream reaches ears. Her assailants suddenly become the targets of a mysterious figure, who swiftly takes them down one after another as they cry out in fear and confusion, desperately demanding to know their attacker's identity. Just before it was too late, stepped in and took action. The character intervenes just in time, rescuing Jinha from the sudden attack. Moved quickly and with purpose, taking down each attacker one by one until none were left standing, their bodies lying motionless across the ground. Finds himself at the center of the devastation, surrounded by the aftermath of the massacre. Jinha slowly retreated, signaling for him to pause, and tried to reassure him that she meant him no harm. She rummaged through the fallen attacker's belongings and discovered a small vial. As she examined it, she recognized it as the antidote. Confidence grew within her, knowing that having this antidote would make it easier to confront the remaining members of the dreaded Blood Fortress. As began to walk away, called out for her to stop once more, questioning her about her intentions. She informs him that someone has poisoned her, leaving her with just 10 minutes before the toxin takes over her body. Responded with an icy tone, telling her she was wrong and revealing that his purpose for being there was to eliminate everyone, her included. He continued by saying that the only reason he would let her leave was because he saw no necessity to end her life personally. Jinha confessed that her survival depended on his presence, acknowledging that ultimately, to him, she was nothing more than a rival. She, driven by desperation, proposes a partnership with him, promising her cooperation in exchange for the antidote. Wondered aloud about her reasons for thinking he would act that way. Jinha pointed out that just 20 individuals remained, and everyone besides them had already joined a group. She explains that, despite his strength, he cannot handle everyone by himself. She goes on to say that if they join forces, she can share valuable details about their martial arts techniques. She promises to stay loyal to him for the rest of her life if he comes to her rescue. Takes a moment to think about her proposal. From his observations up to this point, he determines that even though she carries herself with confidence and prefers to act on her own, she does not appear to be someone who would lie or turn against him. He wanted to know more about the conditions of their deal, so she proposed that they continue their partnership until everyone else was gone. Together, they made a promise to remain loyal and never turn against one another. After taking a brief pause to consider, tossed the antidote in her direction, and she expressed her gratitude to him. Without warning, noticed an unusual noise and questioned whether a new restricted zone had appeared. He informed Jinha of the need to depart, but she responded with her belief that the area was not off-limits. Encouraged her to consider the situation carefully, pointing out that much of the island was now off-limits and that a new restricted zone had just emerged. This probably indicated that the remaining participants would soon arrive at this location. Soon, additional groups of trainees emerged and gradually formed a circle around them. Comes to the grim understanding that any chance to flee has already slipped away. A newcomer stood out and drew Sol's gaze. He senses that this individual stands apart from everyone else. A trainee proposed that the group should target Sol and Jin Ha as their first victims. Someone else recognized them. Bo Sol, known for mastering the wandering beast path, and Jin Ha, whose impressive swordsmanship and relentless curiosity about her fellow trainees made her a formidable presence. The opposing group's leader believed he had finally figured out, and Jinha. He had often questioned why the two had never teamed up before, but now suspected they had decided to join forces. Unsol recalled the small container of antidote powder she had received earlier. She explained to Unsol that she planned to use the poison from the hellish Blood Fortress, believing it might offer them an opportunity. Hurled the powder skyward, causing his adversaries to break into a frenzy of fear as they became convinced it was the infamous poison from the dreaded Blood Fortress, and took advantage of the situation to make their getaway. One of the adversaries quickly noticed that the powder posed no real danger and understood they had fallen for a trick. Their leader immediately commanded the group to chase after their targets. Meanwhile, observed how the powder produced a dense cloud, making it an effective tool for confusing onlookers. Believed the open space put them at a disadvantage, and suggested they move toward the rock formations, where numerous small caves could offer better cover. Unsol wondered aloud if her thoughts matched his own, prompting her to suggest that they should search for a cave where they could battle. In response, Unsol assured her that he already knew of a suitable location. He guided her toward a cave that had a slim opening and a winding corridor stretching deep inside. Could hardly believe he had orchestrated everything so perfectly, and he struggled to accept that he had only now discovered the wandering beast path. She finds herself questioning who he really is. The group hurried toward the rocky terrain, moving as quickly as they could. Upon their arrival, Jinha observed an unusual mist hanging in the air. one that hadn't been present earlier. Shares her opinion, sensing that something unusual is going on. A murderous demon emerged from the thick mist. Stared in disbelief as the truth dawned, they themselves were one of the dreaded killing demons. Notes with composure that the area is off-limits, while he quietly takes in the scene of demons merely monitoring what unfolds. He realized that the instructors had intentionally designated this location as off-limits, knowing that their group was on its way there. Wondered aloud about their next move, seeking guidance. Responded calmly, assuring that as long as they stayed within their territory and did not step over the boundary, the demons would leave them alone. Unsol observed that, if a battle became necessary, there could be far less favorable locations than this one. By positioning themselves with their backs toward the restricted area, they would find themselves in a situation just like battling inside a cave, trapped against a wall with nowhere to retreat. Jinha nodded in agreement, acknowledging that there were no alternatives left, and together, they themselves for the impending battle. Just then, the pursuers caught up to them, and their leader mocked them with a sarcastic question, wondering aloud if they had finished fleeing. Both teams stood opposite one another, their gazes locked, as the deadly demons observed silently from the background. A trainee expressed frustration, feeling that and were making things much more difficult for everyone. Without delay, the character resolved to act swiftly and commanded the others to launch an immediate attack. Head instructor's powerful voice shattered the quiet, declaring that the critical point had come, and the last match would soon reveal the one true victor of the Devil's Palace. As soon as his words faded away, the attackers surged ahead in unison, resembling a powerful flood set loose, all intent on overwhelming Saul and Jinha through sheer numbers. The battlefield instantly erupted into a violent and disorderly fight as blades collided and shouts echoed across the chaos. Amid the tumult, one of the assailants noticed a brief chance and hurled a handful of poison-throwing weapons at Saul. However, Saul's sharp awareness allowed him to evade danger just in time, and the deadly projectiles shot past him, burying themselves harmlessly in the earth. Unsol and battled fiercely, displaying unmatched bravery and determination. Weaved effortlessly through the crowd of foes, her movements swift and graceful. She struck with the precision of a butterfly gliding through fire, silently and skillfully defeating each opponent in her path. While she was momentarily distracted, a formidable adversary emerged unexpectedly from the crowd and unleashed a swift, forceful strike at her, aiming to take advantage of her vulnerability. At the very last moment, Jinha noticed the incoming strike and raised her sword just in time to defend herself. Although her blade stopped the blow, the powerful impact forced her to stagger backward, leaving her arm shaking from the effort. Swiftly steadied herself, then she and positioned themselves back to back. Together, they created an unbreakable barrier, preparing to face the overwhelming crowd of foes closing in on all sides. Amidst the relentless turmoil and non-stop battles, as more enemies closed in, Jinha received a serious injury to her shoulder. Blood streamed down her arm, and she found herself overwhelmed by hopelessness, questioning if this moment marked her final fate. She believes she has given everything she has in her struggles and holds no remorse for the choices she has made. Still, the thought of dying causes her to waver, making it difficult for her to press on with unwavering resolve. Unsol instantly picks up on the wave of hopelessness that has settled over her, and her thoughts about living without regrets linger in his memory. At that moment, he recalls the comforting touch of his grandfather, whose kind hand once rested softly on his head. In an instant, the memory shifts, and he sees his grandfather's face, now marred and covered in blood, right before he died in his embrace. Unsol's resolve surged with fiery intensity, burning brighter than ever. Deep within, he made a silent promise that he would never let himself perish in such a place, not until he had claimed the vengeance he sought. Fueled by intense resolve, charges back into the center of the conflict, now wielding a power even greater than he possessed just moments earlier. With a flurry of rapid, lethal strikes, the fighter cut through the opposing forces, becoming a storm of blades and destruction. He dashes forward with incredible speed, targeting the last of the attackers before they even become aware of the chaos unfolding around them. As one of the adversaries watched the relentless ferocity unfold, fear him, and he shouted accusations, declaring that this was no ordinary man but a demon in human form. The rest of the group watched in fear as their allies collapsed, unsettled by the horrifying sword technique he displayed. The leader of the group suddenly understood that Unsol posed the biggest danger to their scheme. With urgency in his voice, he commanded his team to drop all other concerns and concentrate solely on targeting Unsol, insisting they do whatever it took to defeat him before anything else. At that pivotal instant, with every gaze and blade fixed on him, Unsol recalls the guidance his master once shared, urging him to rely on his instincts in battle. He lets his instincts take control, allowing his body to react before his mind can catch up. In that instant of understanding, he becomes aware that he has unconsciously mastered the true spirit of his master's sword technique. Brimming with confidence, expertly applied martial arts techniques, his swift, ghost-like movements left his adversaries utterly confused, unable to follow his actions. One by one, he dispatched them with lethal accuracy and flawless execution. Only the agonized cries and the lifeless forms scattered across the battlefield remained, creating a sorrowful scene of loss and suffering. While Saul paused to reflect on how well Wu's martial arts training had prepared him, the leader of the assailants seized the opportunity, emerging from Saul's blind spot and landing a powerful blow that caught him completely off guard. Became aware of the sudden threat from the unexpected punch, and without thinking, he instinctively raised his sword just in time to deflect the attack. Finally stands before the group leader, who meets his gaze with an icy expression and informs him without emotion that his time has run out and he has reached his end. The force of the punch was overwhelming, causing Unsol's sword, which had previously endured every strike, to splinter and fracture as if it were nothing more than delicate glass. Because of the powerful blow, Unsol is sent soaring through the air before crashing down harshly onto the distant ground. From her position amid the chaos, Jinha cried out Sol's name in desperation as she watched him collapse. One of the assailants, voice dripping with cruel satisfaction, informed her that she was too late. Sol had already perished from the strike he received. Jinha raised her voice as loudly as she could, urging Unsol to stand up and watch his surroundings, suddenly understanding that the true threat was only just starting. His voice trembled with alarm as he urgently revealed that he was standing right inside a restricted area, a location strictly off-limits to everyone. Unsol fell to the ground, his body battered and paralyzed by pain. Meanwhile, the masked killing demon drew closer, each measured step echoing the approach of death itself, determined to finish what had been started. Glances upward, his eyes meeting the sight of the murderous demon as it gradually reaches out a hand, intent on delivering a fatal strike to end his life. Without warning, head instructor raised his voice, delivering a booming command that demanded an immediate end to all fighting. The killing demon halted its hand mere inches away from Sol's face as soon as the command was given. At the final, heart-stopping instant, Master materializes unexpectedly, silent as a ghost, and presses his icy blade against the murderous demon's throat, rescuing his student from an unavoidable fate. Stared upward in disbelief, his voice barely audible as he tried to say the name of his savior. At last, a sense of safety washed over him, and as the terror of the ordeal faded, overwhelming fatigue and pain dragged him under. He slipped into unconsciousness, his body collapsing as relief and exhaustion him. Moving as fast as he could, head instructor dashed toward his group, his voice filled with both worry and frustration as he ordered them to fetch the mad doctor right away, desperate to save the boy's life and prevent the loss of such a remarkable talent. An assistant voiced concern about the instructor's unexpected choice to call off the third stage of the test in such an unusual way. The head instructor confidently announces in front of everyone that he will personally accept all consequences for his choice. The instructor's heart brimmed with elation as he realized he had at last discovered the one he had sought for ages, a remarkable person whose swift reactions, unwavering determination, and fierce spirit remained unshaken even in the most challenging moments. While the lifeless form of the Unsol was being taken away, the instructor regarded him as an extraordinary find, an unrefined jewel brimming with potential. In the instructor's eyes, This rare and naturally balanced talent deserved a place among the elite 10 true demon disciples destined to shape the future generation. Later, within a grand hallway of the Devil's Palace, we, a respected elder among the palace's leaders, confronted the head instructor and demanded to know why he had acted so impulsively. The assistant recalled for him that, in accordance with the wishes of the wing's master, the initial arrangement had been to choose just 12 finalists, 10 destined to become members of the 10 demonic sects, while the remaining 2 would act as covert observers and informants behind the scenes. Elder Weem Young sternly reprimanded the instructor, cautioning that harsh consequences awaited him for finishing the test with 2 additional participants. Despite this, the instructor responded with assurance, expressing that he was ready to face any punishment and stood by his choice without regret. The elder let out a heavy sigh, his worry evident as he contemplated how the envoys from the 10 demonic sects, soon to arrive and select their disciples, might respond. The instructor, exuding absolute confidence, assures him that no one else possesses a sharper eye for recognizing genuine talent than he does. Unsol gradually opened his eyes, realizing he was lying on a soft bed in a strange room he did not recognize. He looked around in bewilderment, trying to figure out his location and recall how he had arrived there. Surrounded by the pungent aroma of medicinal herbs, he realizes that he must be in an infirmary or a space meant for healing the injured. He examines himself thoroughly and realizes, to his amazement, that every injury, both the ones he could see on his skin and the serious internal harm caused by pushing his sword skills too far, has vanished without a trace. Unsol watched in awe as the Devil's Palace doctor demonstrated a level of expertise far beyond anything he had imagined, leaving Unsol to wonder if he was witnessing something miraculous. Carefully rises from his bed and, with measured steps, opens the door to reveal a silent, seemingly endless hallway stretching before him. A waiting servant approached and offered a respectful greeting, addressing him with the formal title of young master. He then extends a courteous invitation for the other person to accompany him. The servant guided him across an expansive, opulent hall, where the other survivors from the brutal trial were already seated. Gazed through an enormous circular window, taking in the sweeping landscape beyond. Curious about their location, he turned his attention to the servant. The servant explained that they were currently inside the main structure of Hell Island. Came to the realization that this area was the sole part of the island he had never managed to investigate, its secrets still hidden in an air of mystery. Another servant approached with a gentle tone, offering to prepare any meal he wished, expressing understanding and compassion for all he had recently endured. After pausing to reflect, decides to order just 2 bowls of noodles. The plain meal stirs memories of his earlier days. Soon after, steaming dishes are placed in front of him. The moment he catches sight of it, memories flood back. He recalls the joyful times spent with his grandfather, sharing bowls of noodles and enjoying each other's company. While he was deep in thought, he noticed Jinha seated across from him at the table, quietly observing him without a word. Clearly taken aback, wonders aloud what has prompted her to join him at the table without having been asked. Following a brief pause, Jinha finally spoke up, expressing her gratitude for rescuing her during the fight. She revealed that, if it hadn't been for his actions during the last fight, she would have perished and become nothing more than a wandering spirit in the underworld. Unsol appeared puzzled by her unexpected gratitude, and explained that he had merely removed the opponents blocking his path. Jinha went on to clarify the situation for him, pointing out that the strict rules stated there should be just 12 people left after the 3rd stage ended. To prevent the killing demon from taking his life, the instructor abruptly ended the test, ensuring that 14 participants were spared and remained safe. She explained to him that, in her eyes, he was the main reason she had survived, and because of that, she felt it was important to express her gratitude to him in person. She acknowledged that expressing such heartfelt emotions was something completely unfamiliar to her. Went on to explain that a total of 4 days had gone by since he had fallen unconscious following the battle. Couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had been certain that just a single day had gone by since the violent incident. Jinha explained to him that his fortune had been remarkable, as the presence of the eccentric doctor on the island at that exact moment had been a stroke of luck. She began recounting the tale of a famed physician, renowned as the Divine Hand, who was celebrated as the most skilled healer alive. However, after he was unable to save the woman he cherished from a fatal disease, he descended into madness and lost his sanity. Despite his insanity, whispers persisted that he possessed the remarkable ability to heal anyone from even the gravest wounds, provided the person still clung to life, even if only by a single breath. Recognizes that the renowned physician who saved his life is standing before him. Pain washes over him as he shuts his eyes, longing for his grandfather to have met this remarkable healer before passing away. Jinha chose to share a few more crucial details, offering this last piece of help as a parting gesture to someone who had once fought by his side. She confides in him a perilous truth. The demons they battled during the test were not mere guards as they had believed, but were actually seasoned and formidable masters. They had been dispatched by the 10 demonic sects with the sole purpose of evaluating their abilities. Finally realized the reason behind the extraordinary and fearsome mastery of their martial arts. He then turns to Jinha, wanting to know if she understands why the head instructor truly decided to rescue him. Jinha explained that she had been wondering the same thing and had intended to ask him about it, noting how the instructor appeared unusually eager to select him as one of the 10 demon disciples. She wonders aloud if Unsol or his clan has any link to the instructor, or if they have crossed paths in the past, but Unsol responds with a calm certainty, insisting that there is no connection or familiarity between them whatsoever. Jinha grew even more bewildered as she explained that the head instructor had faced harsh consequences for bending the rules to help him, losing his role, and being ordered to return to the Devil's Palace without delay. Stands there, completely bewildered by the situation. He tries to make sense of why someone he's never met would jeopardize both his future and reputation just to help him, even though it's obvious that person will face consequences for their actions. Without warning, a sharp bell echoed through the area, cutting their discussion short. Jinha informed him that the moment they had been waiting for had arrived. This signal served as the prearranged cue, letting all survivors on Hell Island know it was time to assemble. From this, she concludes there is only one possible explanation. The leaders and representatives of the 10 demonic sects have at last appeared to select their new disciples.